Regipalage is back in the room, so we can start. He was keeping the rest of them outside. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. That's better. Welcome to Botswana. My name is Gaongalelwe Mosweu, and I am going to be moderating this session this afternoon, talking about how the DNS industry is making an impact in Africa. A bit about me. I am the Vice President of the Botswana Information Technology Society, BITS, which is civil society for those of you outside coming from outside the country. Civil society here advocating basically for professionalism of the ICT industry and also being the voice of the ICT industry in various fora within the country. I also run a company called Maize Meadows Consulting, which does marketing and business process management and corporate social responsibility programs. I've been involved with ICANN for the last 12 years and have actually sat on the technical advisory committee for BOCRA, which basically established the .bw registry as we know it today and led the redelegation process from BTC stroke, the University of Botswana, to where it is now. I have with me this afternoon David Njuki from Afrinic, the African Network Information Center. On my right, you can wave so they can see you. Thank you. Thank you. On my left, I had Mohamed Bashir from the .Africa Foundation. Each of them will introduce themselves and the organization that they represent. Thank you, gentlemen. David?
Yes. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is David Njuki. I'm here representing Afrinic, the African Network Information Center. I'm part of the technical team for Afrinic. So yeah, we are here to talk about what the initiatives that Afrinic is doing in terms of supporting a lot of the DNS the DNS community on the continent. So that's briefly my intro.
Thank you. Mohamed?
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Mohamed Bashir, and I'm originally from Sudan. I'm the chair of the Africa Steering Committee, which is overseeing the registry. My registry background, I was the registry operator of Sudan.sd for a long time. On ICANN side, I'm the chair of the African Internet Users Organization, or AFRALO.
Thank you. Gentlemen, David, to start with you, who is Afrinic? I think people here might not know who Afrinic is and what Afrinic does and so on. So can you just briefly tell us who and what Afrinic is?
Yeah, so Afrinic is, it's when we talk about our role on the internet, I like using a simple analogy for this. We are the regional internet registry, and during the day I've had a lot of registrars speak in that. So we are on the numbers side. Most of you are on the domain side. So the thing with the numbers, we are independent, but the domain is dependent on the numbers, but numbers are completely independent. So the analogy I would like to use maybe for the non-technical people in terms of our role on the internet is that if I come here, if I meet you here and I save your name and I want to call you, I cannot call you with your name. But if I save your number, I don't need your name to reach you. So we play that role. So in terms of the domain name system and the initiatives that Afrinic is doing in that, we have two main programs running across the continent. So we are trying to really reach a lot of like CCTLDs. So we are using our infrastructure to support DNS resiliency across the continent. So currently we have an Anycast network across the continent. So we partner with CCTLD, whereby we offer secondary DNS services for them, and we also are facilitating a lot of things to do with the root server copy in that sense. So basically, what some of these projects what we're trying to do is that we want, like, I'm trying to avoid to do a lot of the technical talk. Eh? We want you to have the shortest time possible reaching any domain, you know, in case you're doing that. So yeah, basically that's it, Gao.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mohamed, tell us about .Africa.
Okay, no, thank you very much. I think before going and talking about .Africa, we'll talk about the potential and impact of the DNS business, or what we do in the social economic lives of our citizens. I think that's important. So, for example, if we started with numbers, I mean, if the internet is currently contributing to about 18 billion to the African economy, and that was based on by a report from Boston Global Consulting recently. And if the internet has the same impact as mobile phones that had in our life, I mean, in our countries now, it could contribute to about 10% of the GDP within Africa. And that's almost equivalent to about $300 billion US dollars. So the impact is huge. And I think we need to realize that our registries could have positive role in spearheading that and speeding up that adoption. So if we, in the earlier sessions, there was discussion about domain names versus populations. And I think we need to shift our mindset a little bit and think about our registry's impact in terms of bringing businesses online using our country domain names. So, for example, if I give you an example of Kenya, and I will try to give a couple of examples. I will try to get statistics online. I mean, Kenya, it have about almost 90,000 domain names registered. And if you look to the number of companies registered in Kenya, there's about 300,000, roughly 300,000 registered companies in Kenya. And there's about almost 90,000 domain names registered. That's the registered companies only. There's lots of businesses being done by entrepreneurs who don't have even registered names or companies. So the impact definitely could be more visible to us in terms of if we have more Kenyans are using .ke. It's the same if you look at it in different places. I mean, also if you look Egypt as an example, Egypt have more than 1 million registered trademarks, more than 1 million registered trademarks in Egypt. But in terms of the numbers of .egypt domain names, they're about, I think, 20-something thousand. And earlier also we were talking about policies. And if you want to talk in details, we have restrictive policies that prohibit individuals from registering domain names that they want. Some countries require you to register the name in your company registration. You don't get any name. Okay, so it's not first come, first serve. Pricing as well. Pricings are high. We don't have, in terms of registrars as well, sometimes the registries have very restrictive registrars' onboarding procedures. What I mean by that they want a specific criteria of registrars, telecom operators or companies with high turnover. So, when we're losing the big picture that we have many small, medium-sized internet businesses who could really make use of the registrations and really help people to utilize it. So I think there's lots of things that we can do as registries and also registrars in terms of relaxing our policies, reducing our pricing, and that will have a direct impact in terms of registrations in our countries. So this impact will happen when we come from our side. So in terms of how we can do that, I talked about governance models. The 3R model definitely is required, but we're also focusing on small businesses that like resellers and others. Pricing definitely is important, and partnership is important. As registries, we need to partner with companies, let's say registrars, so they can at least have policies that encourage new registered companies to register the country domain name. So immediately when you go to register a company, let's say in Botswana, there is a text that they tell you, well, can you register a .bw domain name, or that's a special price for you, or you need to register it maybe by law or something like that. So encourage businesses to adopt it in a way. Trademark offices as well. So that's what we can do in that industry. And from our side, in terms of Africa, Lucky in the morning talked about the registry. I will be talking about the foundation. So the whole idea of .Africa, that it will be a vehicle to develop internet in Africa, in specifically 3 areas: registrars development, because we think that Africa could help in terms of registrar development, content development, and that's critical. And then the third is the foundation, which is basically the revenue coming from Africa will be going to a foundation, non-profit, that will support internet projects in those areas. So the foundations currently has been registered recently, and hopefully in the coming few months that it will be launched, and we can announce our programs, especially the grants program, where the revenue from the registration will be used for grants for specific projects in Africa. So I hope that's wasn't too long and useful.
Thank you. Those at the back, I hope you can still hear us. Raise your hand if you can hear us at the back. Okay, good. All right, thank you very much, Mohamed. David, what are some of the challenges that you've experienced in the last 3 years? I mean, what are the changes? How has the industry changed, and what kind of challenges do you encounter, and how have you dealt with those changes?
Okay, thank you for the question. Some of the challenges we encounter in our DNS support program is it's the first but not really important is getting in touch with this the country level top level registrars, because you understand that we are given individual contacts and not organization contacts. So when we're trying to push this, you're given an individual contact, and then later on maybe someone leaves that organization. So it becomes difficult sometimes to maintain that connection. And if something changes and someone moved from one organization to another one, it becomes difficult to keep up with that. So another thing I think we've noticed over the years is that I guess on the continent, technology has moved faster than regulation and things like that. So there's, even before I joined Afrinic, there are some country level domains on the continent which are owned. I guess I'll speak for the .mu. It's owned by an individual, you know. So there was a tussle between the individual and the government on who comes in and who owns what. So that's another challenge, because you'd rather deal with a body, with an organization, than an individual. So that's another thing. And I guess and another part is on the policy side, creating more awareness. Sometimes it's we come to these forums and we always see the same faces. So I guess we really need to bring more people in and create more awareness on that side. Yeah.
Mohamed, thank you, David. Mohamed, David speaks about technology as a challenge. He speaks about policy. He also speaks about the law lagging behind the technology. Are these and awareness issues, are these some of the experiences that you've had, or has your experience been different? And if yes, how has it been different?
I think technology is not the issue in terms of users' adoption and usage. And clear evidence is the mobile usage and uptake. I mean, people, if they have the service, that's easily they can access it and utilize it, they will do it. Why more African are registering .com domain names or going to GoDaddy or going to overseas registrations? Because ease of process, quick process, and cheap prices. I think that those are the main reasons. So the technology itself is not the issue. I think it's the policies. I agree with him in terms of the policies, and pricing is the major issue. The industry is there. We have some issues in terms of, yes, cost of hosting in Africa is expensive. That's why we don't have local data centers. That's why we host most of our data and information outside the continent. But those things, regulators and government definitely have a role to play here in terms of ensuring there's competition in that market, because competition will bring the prices down, and ensuring that operators don't have consolidated services and powers at high level. So the government have a role here to play in terms of really facilitating competition and easing up restrictions on areas and businesses that could really fly, which is currently we have issues in. Individuals, users, I mean, we are tech savvies, and I don't think there is any issues in that. I mean, anyone could use now mobile apps and transfer money and do very good things on our handsets. It's just we're not translating that to our DNS industry in terms of availability and ease and affordability. So I think it's not a technology issue. It's not a user's demand issue. If we give them products that's cheaper, easier to get, they definitely will go for it. But the registers have a role. Government definitely have a role in terms of ensuring that infrastructure is available, so small businesses and startups could do business and fly. In the US and other places, 15 years old kids could do great things because simply they have affordable, I mean, with a small amount of money, a teenager could get high internet connectivity to his room. He could have a server that's in his house, hosted in his house. It doesn't have to really to go and really pay for any hosting. You can register businesses easily and quickly. And that's I think that's what hinders us back in terms of ease of doing business and ensuring that we have local infrastructure that's available. But yes, and there's a responsibility between us as register operators here and and also government officials, that we have a role to play in terms of facilitating that.
Thank you very much, Mohamed Bashir. Okay, so let's imagine that the people sitting in this audience were policymakers, were government people who, when they leave here, would go and implement changes that we propose here. What is the number one way that we can make a substantial difference in terms of impacting communities in Africa and even in our countries? I'll start with you, David.
Thank you, Gao. So, yeah, interesting observation. I guess the first thing is forums like this is as a start in terms of taking that discussion forward. So, yeah, we need more participation towards such forums, and also I think more in engagement in terms of we need to make the language more simple in terms of connecting with. Now if you're talking policy, it's a different forum. For me, I'm coming from a technical background, and we always speak technical. But I guess when you're dealing now with policymakers and let's say government, you really need to get to know and speak their language. If it's political, go political. So I guess that's the first step I would suggest. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mohamed.
Yeah, thank you. I think if you are a registry operator, you need to think about relaxing your policies. That's number one. You need to open your TLD, and the whole discussion about the association of with the country. I think we had this debate for the last 7 or 8 years who we should allow to register. I think we need to look at in a simple way. Anyone in the world, if they are interested in your CCTLD, they are associated somehow or a way or another with your country. Simple as that. If somebody is interested in the PW and he's in Germany or she's in Germany, and that's maybe a nice abbreviation for something, he or she is directly or indirectly associated with Botswana. He or she indirectly or directly promoting Botswana. Simple as that. So I think we need to shift our mindset in terms of really open up our registries and allow really registrations to come, because that's where people will see the names and they will value the brand. And the more they see the names and they will see the businesses are promoting it, that will be useful. Reduce the prices, you will get more registrations, you will be able to sustain yourself. $100 of registrations in a small volume, it will not sustain you even if you continue for years in that. If the growth is reducing prices, enlarging the customer base. There's no way, this is the only way. It has been tried multiple times. And yes, reducing any restrictions on individual registration, make it easier for the people in the country to register the domain names, make partnership with telecom operators. They can include it in their bundles. People could pay with mobile money. And I mean, lots of things could be done. So I think the mindsets need to be proactive and not wait for others to come and give you solutions. Be proactive in terms of marketing, reaching out to other entities, see how you can coordinate with them, not sit back as a registry and just wait for registrars to come and be requests to be signed with you. I think that's important. Those changes really could make a big difference internally in terms of adoption and takeover of the CCTLD.
Thank you very much. Mohamed is saying it's all about branding. He says if it doesn't matter who's wearing your brand, if they're in Germany, let them wear it. If they want it, let them have it. I'm just going to throw this question to the audience. I'm just going to take 2 comments on this particular one. just on this particular one, yeah. Are we supporting that anybody in the world, because the world is so open and the internet has made borders basically just physical boundaries? Are we agreeing that if anybody wants to register a .bw domain, a .tz domain, or .ke domain, they should be able to register it from anywhere? Or do they have to have a physical presence in the country? Diop.
Thank you. You can just say Mohamed because this is the first trademark in the ICANN environment. So if you want to differentiate, you can say Mohamed El Bashir.
We don't want
Mohamed is in
fights here.
Okay, so I think we should, there is two answers to that question. One is what rules the African Union Commission, because we are all members of Africa. The diaspora have been ignored by many CC policies. I mean, you can be born in Botswana, living in the US. If you don't provide an address, they don't gonna give you a domain name. It's not fair because the diaspora is member of the African Union. It's the sixth region out of recognized by the AUC and signed, recognized by elder countries. So we need to really separate the diaspora as members of the CCs and the foreign people who apply for a CC. And it's not clear. So I think that we need to give that differentiation first, because from the African perspective, from the AUC perspective, African Union Commission, it's a right for the diaspora to get everything related to their national rights that they are asking for, because they are members of the diaspora. They belong to the country, even if physically they did not live in the country. So the second one is when we talk about the foreigners, I mean, the people who want to have a domain name and that did not belong to the country, we also need to do a two separation there, because this is how we want things to move. If you're an African, you're a member of the African Union Commission, we want to have a global and whole market as one. We all signed the African Union Commission stuff. In Europe, we see them as all Europeans. No matter if you're France or Italy, they are Europeans. They have their own economic commission area. They protect themselves and they put rules together. Same stuff here. We need to differentiate between the African countries and the outside of the African countries. I'm just talking about treaties and things that we have signed. I'm not talking about what my own belief or whatever. These are what we have already signed, but that have not been enforced by our local policy regarding the management of the CCs. So if it, this is regarding this registration. I have another answer for the trademark, but this one is later if you allow me to talk about it.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Thank you.
Thanks, Michele. I'm one of those horrible Europeans. I have to really disagree with what Mohamed's saying. I mean, the idea that you would...
It is understandable. Thanks.
Look, Mohamed and I normally disagree, so this is nothing new. The idea that you would try to impose a set of boundaries on a market which is by its very essence global is insane. I mean, the reality is, as speakers have said today, at the moment, the costs for hosting, for bandwidth and various other things in many parts of Africa are exorbitant. So you end up having to do it overseas. When I first started my company in Ireland about 18 years ago, we were in a similar situation. The first contract we signed with a data center was for 256 kilobits of bandwidth, and we were paying, I think, €1,500 for that. just for the bandwidth. I mean, thankfully things evolved, but at the time, most of the content for the Irish market was hosted in the US or the UK. The prices for everything were completely nutty. The .ie CCTLD was super restrictive, and that was reflected in the numbers. Now you look at the CCTLDs that are big, that have the large numbers. They have removed all the barriers to entry. They've made it as simple and as easy as possible to register a domain. They don't care. I mean, ultimately, if you're concerned about abuse, if you're concerned about security, if you're concerned about pollution of the DNS, of all those kind of things, there's ways to deal with that. By putting up false barriers, though, I don't think it isn't going to help you in the long run. You need to look at it more kind of holistically and think, okay, more domain names means more revenue. As long as there's no kind of all the domains that are being registered are just malware and phishing, then obviously that's a problem. But if the overall quality of the domains that have been registered and how they're used is not negative, doesn't always have to be positive, then you've got more money to invest back into your local infrastructure. And things that you should be looking at is encouraging governments to invest in things like IXPs, to invest in bringing down the cost so that it's easier for you to host the content closer to the source. Now, I mean, also as well, as a foreign, my company is interested in working in this part of the world and in other parts of the world. But I mean, if I was to follow this through logically, then Mohamed's saying we're not welcome. I mean, is that the message you want to send?
Thank you very much. I didn't mean to open a can of matata. Okay, can I please ask you? I've noted both of you. I won't forget, but I'll start with you when we go to the floor. Is that all right? Is that okay, my professor? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And then let's just talk about the issue of what kind of projects that has Afrinic, for instance, done. I know in the past you have undertaken IPv6 trainings, and that. So I just want to know about any kind of social impact programs that you've undertaken over the last 10 years in Africa, and what has the impact been?
Okay, thank you for that. In terms of social impact projects, Afrinic has there is a program called FIRE. It's a fund for internet research. So what happens annually, there's a grant we encourage for applications across the continent on people who are doing like projects on the ground and like impacting the communities. So we allow them to apply and we give them grants. So it's maybe I can give the address of the website. It's fireafrica.org. So that's one of them. And then another one that I had mentioned earlier on briefly, and I like what the gentleman said there about bringing services closer to the source. So we have our DNS support program initiatives where we partner with IXPs and all that. So what we do, when we partner with them, we bring a service like our DNS services on location to just reduce the time to connect to those things. And yeah, I would say those are the two key ones that I've identified. Yes, yeah.
Thank you very much. To those of you who may not have got that, it's fire like mulilo. fireafrica.org. Please visit the website and check out when the next grants are going to be running. Thank you very much. Mohamed, what projects have you had as Africa Foundation, or what plans do you have in terms of having programs that will help communities that in Africa?
I mean, the foundation is currently in its establishment phase. So, but in terms of programs and plans, the whole idea is that the revenue or the surplus of the revenue from the registration and from the registry South Africa will be going to the foundation, and basically the foundation will establish a grants program in 3 main areas: registrars development, content development, and generally Pan-African projects. So we'll open up applications for those grants, and hopefully that could be soon as we progress and finalize the foundation and announce it. So that's one of the things. Maybe the foundation will be working as well in terms of advocating in terms of policies or working with FTLD or other stakeholders, how we can help the DNS business grow, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to ask one last, I'll come to you now. Is there anything else that either of you feel that we're leaving out in this conversation? What is it that, again, like I said, let's make believe that this is a group of ministers from all of Africa, because people here are representing their countries, and they're going to be able to go back and say, this is what we've discussed, and this is how we can make an impact back home. What is the one thing that we're leaving out, not addressed, if any?
For me, not really leaving out that, but I like the conversation between Mohamed and him. And my question, it's more of a question and an observation, is in terms of locking out other people, registering and all that, are we dealing with a limited resource, or in terms of, like, you have a .bw, is it a limited resource or it's an unlimited resource? You get? So, because from the numbers side, we are having conversations about Afrinic having the last IPv4. So, and there's a lot of conversation going on around that. So, from a domain perspective, what I would like to ask is, are you dealing with, because numbers, is it finite or something like that? So that's, I throw it back to you guys on that. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Mohamed El-Bashir, is there anything that we're leaving out in this discussion? Something that you might have wanted to say earlier on, but maybe you saw how somebody was looking at you in the audience and you like, okay,
I think I might throw a couple of things maybe to just get further debates. Yeah. Now, I mean, that was a good discussion earlier, but I think 2 things. One is, if you are in a government entity or regulator, support your internet exchange point. If you don't have an internet exchange point, make an internet exchange point, because that will help internet local hosting, reducing costs for your operators, and it's good for the local internet, let's say, community. That's number one. Second, if you're a regulator, try to bring competition to the area of hosting, data centers hosting, ensure that there's more data centers, even private sector data centers. I mean, if the telecom operators are, I mean, with their licenses, they're able to do that, bring new licenses that could bring that business up forward. That's key, to have local hosting in the countries. There's need to be competition. Without competition, prices will not go down. Registry, I think I throw it earlier, relax the registration, open up the registration. We have important products and brands people are seeking. We are selling our brands, either KE, SD, MA, BW, those are our, country names and brands. And actually we're opening it up to the world so they can know about it. We shouldn't be limiting ourselves and so protective. I think we should be opening up this space, allowing registrations to come, because basically this is we are telling people about our identity. We can have rules to police any bad content, any abuse, anything. That's doable. But I think it's important that we open up policies and open up registration so more people know about Market Sudan and Kenya and Botswana. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mohamed,
I'm giving my experience as a registrar on the social
Thank
initiative.
you. Yes, please share.
11 years ago, because when we talk about social impact, thinking about music, sports, entertainment, health and education. And what I have tried so far, 11 years ago, is just, it was my own experience. We set up what we call My Music Online. It was based on a very simple and easy statement from the market. I see that all the musicians we have there at that time, they were very famous outside of the country, even internationally, but they did not sell anything online. They even did not have a website available. And they were victim of piracy when they create or label one single stuff. One week later, it is online, sold by other people. Because what? Because they have no website. They have no e-commerce. They have nothing where people can go and buy. And I say, what can we do as techie, as the tech industry, to help the music industry to become, to get revenue out of their production? And we work with Nick SN, and we say, let's give to all the musicians a domain name. And we're going to do a race program. All developers and web designers come together through a race program. And in one night, we have over 10% of increase on the domain name registration countrywide. It means what we're expecting from us is how we can duplicate such type of initiative at different sectors and variants to give revenue to people, to individuals, to real people who are working. Not necessarily just giving ourselves, like the feeling that we are taking. No, we should have the feeling that we have helped other sectors get revenue out of the IT. And that's really where we answer the question about what's going to be the social impact. Same stuff for the healthcare and the education. How many fake and drug products are circulating in Africa just because the domain name that people are using are fake, are just using scam, phishing, or whatever? Because we did not try to implement some safeguard regarding the registration of pharmacy or hospitals or even education or whatever. So my question is coming back on these different issues, because if we don't organize the market, we end up by no identity. We end up by no guidance for people who are not well educated. We're going to increase the misabuse and the misleading of people who want to join and who become blind in an environment where they don't know what are the rules, and who's going to help them set up the rules and follow the rules. So these are just some examples I want to share with you, because my meeting with Mekele will going to end up outside of the room, because we'll not have enough time to discuss all the issues that we all agree or disagree regarding how to increase the domain name in the continent. But I don't see that we should be ashamed of talking about empowering local private sector. It has nothing wrong to empower local business sector. It doesn't mean that when you empower local business sector, you restrict international businesses to come. No, it's the contrary. I mean, we ask them to come and join, but in a way that we're going to empower the local private sector, not just as we're dealing with many other industry to come to get private sector to come, get the contract, get the deal, get back home, and there's nothing coming out of this, of the deal for the local population. This, I mean, this is obvious. This is exactly what we want. Thanks.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a challenge. I want you to reflect on it as we take questions from the floor. So finally, Dr. Nyirenda and Alice, ladies first.
Thank you. Finally, ladies first. And in fact, the first thing I want to discuss here is the title of the panel. It's Domain Name Industry and the Social Impact in Africa. And I haven't had a single woman talk about the domain sector, talk about the challenges, or any African woman talk about being in this business. Yes, I know Michaela said that there's no domain name industry, but I think it's really sad to see that, and perhaps this is something that I think the whole group and most of us need to think about in terms of the impact, social impact that we're having, just the gender disparity. And then I have a question, and I agree with Michele, and I know with probably the three of us, Mohamed, Diop, and I, and Michele will have a discussion around this. I truly and we truly believe as Mozilla that the internet is a global resource, open and accessible to all, and that goes for the domain name sector as well. And so calling on, for example, an organization like the African Union Commission or the European Commission to come up with rules and regulation that then control how domain names are registered or owned, who can register where, I think is something that we really truly need to discuss and ask ourselves, do we really need to have intergovernmental bodies or governmental bodies creating rules around this? And in fact, I wonder what ICANN would think about that, and the GAC specifically. So that's the other question. And then we haven't really started looking at, I know it's only big tech when it comes to issues to do with trust, and I think that's what Mohamed Diop was talking directly to when it comes to health and how we make sure that this sector specifically in the Africa region, takes into consideration how we develop and create trust. Trust not only at the African region, but trust globally, so that people can do business with us, we can do business amongst ourselves, and I think these are the social issues that we are not really considering. I also totally agree with how important it is, especially at the moment as Africa digitizes, as the free trade zone was launched recently, and when a free trade joins, it will be all 55 countries. We need to be extremely careful in terms of so Africans are not just consumers. So digital skills are extremely important as we consider some of the social impact, because, for example, one very big example is when you look at the way African governments are going about digital ID, and we're going to have these discussions tomorrow, is for most people, especially marginalized communities in the Africa region, women included, the very first time they come into contact with the digital sector or technology specifically is when they access, for example, e-government services. And if they don't have those skills, what does that really mean? And, what responsibility do we have? As the DNS sector. So I think it's something that we really do need to, to consider. And I'm actually quite sad to see it was only 2 panelists and 3 panelists with yourself discussing this really critical issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that deserves a round of applause. Are you answering her? Okay. Nyirenda.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to comment earlier on about restrictions for registrations. And I was going to ask, who will restrict my horrible European from naming his child Mohamed? There is no such restriction. I think that it should go also with domain names. I think it should be as open as possible. That was a comment, but I have 2 questions, if you allow me. Okay. So again, from the last speaker, I think the topic is impact on society. I had 2 issues. One of the impacts of the DNS on society is the widening up access to languages, and IDNs have been an effective tool for opening up the DNS to the society. So I was just going to ask on .Africa, when are we going to see IDNs on .Africa? .Africa houses a number of scripts in Africa that are not necessarily Latin. I had a question for Afrinic. I think that those of us who operate registries really would like to use the Afrinic Anycast system. But it's been observed to be unreliable. And I think that over the past 2 years, there have been at least 2 or 3 incidents where the system couldn't really be reliably used. Coming from a technical background, I was wondering if Afrinic is really working good enough, because most of us are hesitating. We need Anycast in Africa. There's only one Anycast system in Africa, and that's Afrinic, but it doesn't work. So it's something that you really need to have a look at carefully. It's something that most of us need. But if you ask the registries in Africa, they do have access to the Anycast system, but they're not using the Afrinic Anycast system. Finally, I think he asked an interesting question from a theoretical point of view. Is the DNS a limited resource? Ideally, mathematically, yes, but the resource is bigger than IPv6.
Thank you very much. Can we allow them to take the questions and then come back to the floor? I've seen you, Rekepalet. David, most of the questions are directed at you.
I know, yeah. Thank you, Dr. Paulus, for the question. As Afrinic, I can assure you that we've been putting in measures to our Anycast infrastructure, and if anything, I have a presentation tomorrow about that. We are currently supporting 24 CCTLDs on the continent. And our infrastructure is present in 9 countries so far. So we've really been putting in measures to make it, to ensure that it's because it's a critical infrastructure, to ensure that it's reliable. So I can assure you that it's something we've been thinking about, and yeah. So yeah, the challenges have been there, as with any project. But the measures have been put in place to ensure that it's reliable. Yeah.
Thank you. You good? Okay. Mohamed.
I will be brief. For the Africa, Lucky Masalele is here, and he can sure you can talk with him about if I can open the next round. We will be applying for the African IDNs. Might be. I think cost might be an issue because previous round it was 185,000 per application. But the good news that there is African countries who did deploy IDNs, like Egypt, for example, .Arabic, .Masr, Algeria, Morocco. They have now their domain names in Arabic. I think Mauritania as well, Sudan. Tunisia as well, yes. So it's the good number. I think it's what we need to encourage others to apply and get their IDN CCTLD. For example, Ethiopia could be a good example for the next African IDN CCTLD in terms of having Amharic, the name of the country in Amharic language. So it's or Amharic script. So that could be something that's we need to encourage. In terms of Anycast, there is, beside Afrinic, there's Anycast services available. PCH as well, they have African Anycast instances, and many CCTLDs in Africa are using PCH as well. Packet Clearinghouse.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. In addition to what he's just said about IDNs, Dr. Nyirenda, there is a specific session talking about universal acceptance initiatives tomorrow and IDNs. So I'd like to believe that at that session we'll be able to discuss more and delve more into details around internationalized domain names tomorrow. Thank you. Any other questions from the floor? Reke Palez.
Well, thank you very much. Just one or two questions, more especially, maybe for Afrinic, it was just to share some of the latest policy discussions which you are having at Afrinic. The other thing which I wanted to find out from you is, what initiatives are you having in terms of encouraging the deployment of IPv6 and its utilization? As much as you may be having the pool of IPv4, I think in the long run, they will get depleted, but we need to start working in terms of how do we encourage this utilization. I can share with you from having interacted more especially with other policymakers, in particular the law enforcement. They are really concerned with the utilization of network translation in Africa, that, when they do their investigation, it is one of the major concerns. And the idea is, if we were to be utilizing these public IP addresses, it will be, address some of these concerns. And I think with the growth of the IoT devices, you can realize that we're going to have that huge demand. Now, the other issue which I wanted to touch on, which maybe Mohamed touched on, is the issue of data hosting. I just wanted us, sometimes I do sit in areas where we advise policymakers. And when we ask some of these difficult questions, when somebody asks me to say, Kipales, you say, I should allow our data to be hosted outside the country. But European countries, they say their data should not be hosted outside the European Union. Why should I allow our data in Africa to be hosted outside, while other continents are saying the data should be hosted? So those are some of the things which I think we need to debate and say, how can we advise governments? What policies should we put in place? When it comes to the issue of data privacy, how should we deal with it as Africa? I know there is a group which is going to discuss this under the Malabo, but I thought I wanted to get your view, because that's some of those things which are affecting maybe the development of the issue of data hosting. The other thing which I wanted to put as a general question, because here we're talking about the social impact. And I think earlier on there were a discussion that when you look at internet shutdowns, they're happening mostly in Africa. And we never discussed to say, why are these internet shutdowns happening? What can we do to assist governments that they do not shut the internet down? They do not shut the internet at that particular time. We address their concern, because the main reason maybe they are shutting out the internet is that they have some concern. But the issue is, we have to debate at this forum to say, what are the advice we can assist? What are the problems? So that we are able to engage policymakers with regard to this issue of internet shutdown. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the gentleman who has just spoken is the host. So when you clap, you must clap. He's your host here. So if you don't clap properly, he'll shut you down. Gentlemen, internet shutdowns, and these are not just directed to my panelists here, but to any of you in the audience who might shed some opinions and experiences in terms of the questions that he's asked. He's talked about data hosting. He's talked about network address translation. And him and I had this discussion, this conversation a couple of weeks ago to say, really, law enforcement is really, really worried because you'll find one IP address that is... and you don't know, like companies don't even know who that IP address belongs to. So what is it that we can do? So ladies and gentlemen, please Before I revert to my panelists, is there anybody in the audience who wants to share anything? Okay, it's a touchy topic. Shutdowns. Okay, David?
Okay, yeah, thank you for the question. So, yeah, I picked 3 things from your questions. The first bit you're asking about IPv6. So, as Afrinic, we have a capacity building department, and they're involved in pushing, training in different countries, and also recently, in the last 3 years. The department has been involved with now doing e-learning in terms of now engaging members. And for the e-learning part, we also have now a certification bit whereby you can go in and do your training, register, and get like IPv6 certified. So we are really pushing the bit for IPv6 through our capacity building department. And for the second bit, you inquired about policy. So as Afrinic, policy is a part of us, and annually we have 2 main meetings. We're just coming recently from Uganda for the Africa Internet Summit. So we have policy discussions there, and then our second meeting, which is usually towards the end of the year, is now more policy focused. The first one is more, it has to do with training, policy, and our annual general meeting and all that. So the one that happens at the end of the year is more policy engaged. And on also matters of policy, we have interesting discussions on our mailing lists about policy. So if you go to our mailing list, there's a RP, it's called the RPD, Resource Policy Discussions mailing list. You just go to list.afrinic.net, you click on the RPD, that's where a lot of policy discussions happens. And with this space also, it's during our meetings, we try to engage like new members or newcomers. We have a newcomer sessions, and we try to tell them how to approach the policy discussion and all that. So that's on the policy side. Yeah, and the other part that you mentioned about, you're talking about government. So we also have it's not really a department, but we have something called the AFGWG, the Afrinic Government Working Group. It's basically what this is under our, we engage with stakeholders. So government it's an interesting topic, because with law enforcement and as Afrinic, we have our WHOIS service, because we have to engage with, it's still an ongoing process, because someone comes to you and say, oh, this IP has done this and this and all that. So we were trying to get into that space where we we engage with governments and teach them how to use some of our services in terms of if they want to identify, okay, who owns this IP and all that. So yeah, that's on the third point. Yeah, on internet shutdowns, I will not touch on that, because I don't have an opinion on that right now as Afrinic, but I have my own individual perspective. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Alice. I'll come back to you.
Thank you very much for letting me speak again. I'll touch a little bit on the data localization point that was made, and I truly believe that governments have a mandate actually for some aspects of really sensitive data to be mandatorily stored at the national level. Especially those that have to do with security and strategic purposes. But then having a blanket requirement to localize data at the national level is actually detrimental to the economy of and the openness of the internet economy, as a global, again, resource, open and accessible to all. And the reason why it's successful is because it's open. It also, localizing data, all data, without really categorizing which aspects are sensitive and strategic, could actually instead create a security issue. And I'm not a security expert here, but could really create a security issue, increase risks, and makes it easier for nefarious actors to be able to access, especially because then there's one point of failure if all the data is in one specific space or one specific national space. Another one that governments need to consider is that we keep talking about dealing with, for example, fraud and if we localize data, especially in many African countries, you preclude banks and public authorities from being able to work in conjunction with other international partners, especially in the banking SWIFT process or system. So what we would like to encourage rather is that each country, perhaps at the African Union level, is to really look at, we have the Malabo Convention that has several provisions that are actually quite important, and it's sad to see only 2 countries have ratified it. And only 22 countries have, not many countries have cybersecurity laws. So I think it's important to create a legal framework around, appropriate protections and safeguards regarding data specifically, rather than a blanket legislation that enforces data localization. And in fact, if anything, it will also be detrimental to the DNS sector as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mohamed.
Thank you. I will just follow up on Alice.
Okay.
It's Mohamed what? Number 1 or number 2?
Mohamed D. Mohamed
Okay,
D.
let's start with number 2.
I don't want to contest number 2 and number 1, Mohamed. I'll just follow up on Alice's point. Government data and as a government data is sensitive, and it definitely needed to be hosted locally as a government data. And it's also, you need to minimize the number of, if you don't have a local government data center, and although governments now are building data centers, you need to ensure that you have a local internet exchange point, because if your local traffic as well could be sensitive going outside the country, and it's going many hubs outside the country. And I think we realized after Snowden revelation that there is security risk and actually not security, there's reality that those data is really being intercepted in different places. So as a government, I think this is a priority in terms of hosting your sensitive data internally, and also encouraging that to have an internet exchange point, so to route traffics that's not required to be sent abroad. That's number 1. In terms of your point regarding the data centers is very critical, and I think it's the part of my also other hats in previous career. I was a technical director for a regulator. I was leading the regulator in the state of Qatar for about 8 years there. And we had the same issues. You have mainly consolidation of services. You have telecom operators with their licenses also. They're building data centers. So the only solution is really either one, to develop or introduce new licenses for that type of business, which that means you're going to have tough fights with your mobile operators or your telecom operators, because they see that's part of their revenue stream and their licenses. But that area is very important for really local hosting. You need to have commercial data centers being established in the country, and you need to have competition in that area. That's how you can bring hosting back. And if you have commercial entities who are building data centers, That means companies will be, they have an option to host their data locally. If there's competition, it will be cheap. So they don't have to really to go and pay for servers outside the country if they can do that in the country. So the regulator have an obligation in a way that there is certain elements of the market that might not be incentivized or not moving, or maybe need to regulate it and push for it, so there could be a competition in that area. So that's really very critical. If there is no that competition, I mean, there is no competition in data centers, basically everyone will continue hosting their data outside the country. And that's the reality, because it's pricing. I'm not going to, as an individual, as also if I have a company, I'm not going to pay thousands of dollars for a local hosting while I can get it less than $100 there. So this is important. A regulator should do. Internet shutdown. That's very personally. That's very important topic to my heart now, because I'm coming from Sudan, and Sudan has witnessed one of the longest internet shutdowns actually in Africa. I think it's started 3rd July and ended 2 weeks ago. It was almost more than a month. And there is no reason for it. There is no justification that could be safe for it. We should all be against it in our own different, really, grouping or stakeholders. If you're a government, through your AUC membership or other intergovernmental organization membership, say this is wrong, internet should be not shut down for any reasons, and it could become a habit. And we have seen regular internet shutdowns happening for reasons like high school exams, and so I mean, we are in 2019. We should do better than that. Elections. So it's this. I think with our different hats, civil society, governments, definitely we need to call this out and say this is wrong. And the internet is for the good. Could be used for bad things, but we should not really limit people's access to sources of information like the internet. So that's passionate personal issue for me, because it affected myself and my family and how I communicate with my family, because the only thing we could use was SMS and calling international calls, really. And there is no reason for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, really. 2 weeks without internet. I know that in a lot of offices, when you get into the office and there's no internet, people just lose morale. It's like people just want to go home. It's as if you told them there's no electricity today. Yeah, and they'll tell you, and somebody will say, I can't do reconciliation because there's no internet. And reconciliation actually needs a piece of paper and another piece of paper. And they'll say, no, there's no internet. Mohamed.
Thank you, Chair. So just two things that I want to share, because it seems like the session of tomorrow have been almost been done. The session that was supposed to be chaired by Barack for privacy, data protection, and policy, we spent more than half an hour on it. So it's just now. I think to comment on the issue of the GDPR, because when I listened to what Mohamed Bashir was trying to explain, like for him, the most important thing is the data from the government, and so I think data, government data is critical, is very important for sovereignty, for anything. So we agree, but data from consumer also are so critical, and it is the responsibility of the government to protect them. And that's really why, when you look at the European economic area, they come with one policy to protect their whole citizens. There are more than 400 million people, and wherever you come from, if you are not compliant with the GDPR, so they don't gonna do business with you. So I think it becomes very critical that the government and people who get the responsibility of managing the area and the country to understand that the protection of data consumer and end users become one key priority to all of them. And it's a little bit pity that we did not see that happening, because where we store data, how we process data, how we access data. All these have been part of that policy. And what we have seen here in Africa is every country is trying to set up its own rules with different parameters depending on the understanding on what they think is critical and what is not. And I think what they are missing, many of them, is they did not see that the protection of the consumer and the end users is as critical as the protection of the data from the government side. So that's really one comment that I want to share with regarding the protection of data. The second comment is on the NAT, the network address translation stuff. On my experience, I have seen that many telco operators, they are running their whole network with private IPs, doing one translation upon one public IP, and they are happy with it. Because what? Because they say it works. Because people who are implementing this type of network, usually they are not necessarily people coming from the IP side. And I've seen that in many telco operations, the NAT is not an issue. They just implement all the network with NAT. And it's a question of education, of awareness, of Afrinic is doing a great job. But if you look at the number of telco operators in all our regions, I think that the ISP was more lucky in the past because they have that experience, that knowledge. But coming to the new telco environment, it's a little bit different. These guys are not necessarily complying with what we are trying to be as a best practice in terms of usage of the IPv6, of the IPv4, without pushing for NAT. Very few deploy IPv6 because when you ask them, they say, we follow the money. We did not see the money now in IPv6. So we're waiting until people show us the money behind the IPv6. So we have a long way to go again. And I think that training, awareness, and even also some government have to be leaders. Like if BOCRA, for example, say that all the eGov service is going to be on IPv6 server, maybe this going to, push a whole movement to people to use it, because there is nothing to do at the end user side. All our smartphones are IPv6 compliant. The only thing is the telco. So if you say that new server have to be deployed on V6, it means the next day our cell phone, our computers are all IPv6 compliant. They're just going to connect right away. They're going to change anything. So the effort have to be coming from the telco side, from the enforcement mechanism, from the fact that people are going to put incentive for public service who are going to deploy V6. These are things that need to be done in order to make people, going down that path.
Thank you very much, Mohamed, number one. I think BOCRA is listening. I'm able to pick on BOCRA. I'm home. I think BOCRA is listening, and I think across the room, really, I think there's a conversation that needs to be had. Perhaps we are falling behind in terms of V6 deployment because we've not been bold enough to say, you are going to do this. Otherwise, this is not going to happen. So that way we can then address some of your concerns, Mr. Gaongalelwe, about, crimes and things like that. So thank you very much, Mohamed. I think, are there any other questions from the floor? Because I'm about to close. Okay. I should have said I'm closing a few minutes ago. Okay. Michaela, and then, are you going to be able to stop before sunset, Michaela? Okay, all right. And then the gentleman just in front of you, behind Alice. Thank you.
Thanks. No, I can do brief at times. It's not easy for me, but I can do it. Just two quick things. With respect to the GDPR, it's the European Union, not the European Economic Area. Bit of a difference. And then with respect to data, there's nothing stopping a European company from storing data in Africa. Absolutely nothing. As long as the safeguards for the data are in place. There's nothing in any of the legislation that stops you from transferring data outside the European Union. What it does say is you need to make sure that you know where the data is going and you know that the safeguards and the handling and the processing of that data is at the same level of protection that it would get within the European Union. That's all. As long as you can meet that, there's absolutely no issue. And, a lot of us provide services to financial institutions. And I think, Alice has a lot of experience with government. Listen to the lady, please.
Thank you. Alice, you have a spokesperson just behind Alice. Please also let us know your name.
Oh, okay. My name is Montel Terence Selwani from Banaba Kwale Association, Revita Naga Melody. What I just wanted to ask is, I see that the topic, the discussion is how is the domain name industry impacting the African society. So I want statistics to understand how many of the civil societies in Africa are actually having their domain names according to each country. That's what I want to know. That's all. Yeah.
This one I'm going to run to Mohamed. He's got numbers.
I mean, this one was also the tough one here because we don't have even one report or unified sources of information about the registrations in Africa. FTLD, that we have numbers. I mean, for countries, I guess, but within this, let's say the CCTLD, how many non-profit organizations are registered there? Unless you go to that CCTLD and check if they have statistics about each second or third level that they have, for example, org.ke or maybe that if there could be numbers there, but it's difficult to find specific number. But I'm not sure, unless if you haven't.
Yeah, then, sorry, Madam Chair, then why isn't the AFTLD doing research on this? Because I think it's easier if you go to .org, most civil society groups tend to register as .org. So I think, Barak, I'm looking at you, we should probably have those statistics perhaps, and maybe this is another thing we need to do in terms of reaching out to civil society and see how we can assist. But I'm sure we have statistics from PIR on .org. Thanks.
Much. I saw a hand up. Omar, you had your hand up, and the gentleman over there.
Okay, I'm Escolonter. I'm chairing the IFTLD, and I want to react about Alice checking. What is important in my sense is also to offer secondary level domains .org.bw to make the opportunity to the guys to not go to .org. I think this is a manner to push the civil society to have to be on the net and to make some activities. In my company, we have a .org.sn. And many of the civil society members comes and is what it says is a low price because it's about $10 to act for this. I think this can be a common policy that we can talk about and say how to help the civil society to be on the net.
Thank you very much. .org. Thank you.
Hi, this is Joe Abley from Public Interest Registry and .org, and we're a sponsor of this meeting, and we're very happy this meeting is happening, and I would encourage everybody who has an organization that might naturally fit in .org to also look at their local CCTLDs, and we will support local CCTLDs in building their businesses and taking their infrastructure within their own borders wherever we can. So we think this is fantastic.
Thank you very much. Thank you. You see, conversations are happening. Things are happening. Omar, did you want to say anything?
Maybe just to add what our boss Alex has said, FTLD has a project which is still underway in creating an observatory where all the data for all the CSTLDs in Africa will be at one place. The project is at an advanced stage, so that's what I wanted to assure members, delegates here. So maybe by next year or next year by one, you'll be able to access all this information on CSTLDs from FTLD. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Abdelmanam Galila for the record. I just want to announce that I am working with my colleague from Uganda for the project of internet measurement inside Africa. And I hope maybe next meeting we will say that we are up and running for further measurement. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. You've been such a good sport. In closing, I think the key things that are coming out are really revolving around the theme of this forum. Really, the issue is consumers want choice. We want to be spoiled for choice. But we want to be able to get choice at reasonable prices. If you don't provide reasonably priced choices, you're not providing us choices. You are still as .tz or .ke leaving us to go to .com or whoever else is going to offer me a domain name at $10 for 2 years. And I'm also hearing from the discussion around the room that really consumers also want to be able to trust you. So put safeguards in place so that we can trust you, and also communicate with us and tell us what safeguards you have in place. If you are selling something and I go onto your website and I buy that thing, what are you putting in place for me to be able to trust that I will get what I need, and also that the information that I put on your website, you're not going to be using it for criminal activities. What I'm also hearing from the discussions is also that it's a call to government and a challenge to governments. There's a call to governments to say, please make, and people like the regulators saying, make regulation more bolder. That's what I heard Mohamed saying, that we need to be bolder and say, if all the devices that are coming into the country must be V6 compliant, so that we can, and also, go to the telcos and educate them, show them the dangers and make them aware of the dangers or the perils of the current system, as it were. I'm also hearing everybody here saying we need to have competition, because competition also drives prices down, or competition also drives service up, customer service up. Competition also drives the customer experience. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, unless my two panelists want to add anything else, I will say thank you very much and good night. Alice, thank you for your discussion. We'll have a discussion outside of this meeting. For those of you who are new to this country, I know that you've been welcomed this morning. I'm going to welcome you again to Gebs by Night. Welcome and thank you. Good night.
May I please have your attention?